Daniel Zhou, my trip to China, Daniel Zhou. Let's welcome Daniel.
Masters and guests. I hope you're all doing well. Anyway, my name is Daniel, and I've worked in Building 225 prior to our national quarantine. I work in the area of multimedia information. You might have noticed that I've had, or maybe still have, an occasional stutter, and I hope it doesn't surface as much here. So, I'm not. I'm also not an especially good planner. So, without much of an organized plan with which to overcome it and related speaking issues, I joined Toastmasters and set out to improve with the most data-driven method I knew, brute force and practice. Now that's been almost a year with the quarantine giving me more free time to organize my thoughts. Let's see how this goes. My speech has been a little late in coming, almost a year since I've joined, so I will be talking about my family trip to China in the June of 2019, which is about 8 years since my past visit. It's a trip that saw my hardworking parents and grandparents, and especially my father's mother, greatly refreshed. First, we visited my mother's side of the family in Guiyang in the Guizhou province. We visited her parents, my maternal grandparents' home. Having practiced one particularly key recipe during my stay in Maryland and having eaten my grandparents' cooking as a child and again as an adult, I looked forward to serving my grandparents my signature tomato and tofu soup, of which I was proud since I didn't cook that much or with great variety. Unfortunately, the series of visits throughout the day, including a visit to a bakery for a birthday cake for their 83rd birthday, and other stores for tourism and clothes shopping, left me very burnt out, with the result that I literally burned myself with hot oil, and the soup didn't turn out as well as I had hoped. It ended up by my mom's intervention, so I guess all's well that ends well. The second part of our trip was spent with my father's side of the family in the village of Wanxing, near the city of Lixian in the Hunan province, where Mao Zedong was born and raised. My father's mother, my grandmother, had turned 90 the past month, and we celebrated her birthday in a traditional Chinese ceremony with a huge feast attended by the neighbors, numbering the hundreds, including my extended family, and conducted by hired performers and singers. Now, to describe the traditional Chinese ceremony, and I hope my fellow Chinese here, Lisa and James, among others, don't roast me over this or have the charity to correct me mid-sentence if any of my descriptions get out of hand. If you've seen stereotypical depictions of ancient Chinese Qing dynasty, men and women in long robes, funny hats with the tails pointing out towards the sides, with the exaggerated makeup, beards, blush, and what have you, you have a very good idea of how the people conducting the ceremony were dressed. If at some point in your life you've associated images of Chinese people with kowtowing, bowing, red envelopes, and possibly exaggerated ancestor veneration, you also have a pretty accurate image of the proceedings of the ceremony itself. Finally, if any of you have associated China with fireworks of China due to their historical innovation or the otherwise stereotypical appearance of Chinese firecrackers, you can already imagine most of the ceremony's soundtrack. And if you associated the Chinese with erhu music, even more so. Karaoke also present was another key musical addition. There was a lot of food in and out of the ceremony, but even speaking of food in the ceremony, there was enough variety that I have significant trouble describing it in detail, let alone recalling it from memory. What I do remember is that it was generally saucy and that pork, beef, and shrimp were everywhere. Alcohol was served far more than tea. Sorry, Manyang, if you're present, and especially the 53% Maltai liquor. In the U.S., I used to drink it with my dad during the winter season with in small, I guess, say 10 milliliter shot glasses. In China, the size of the shot glasses was upgraded to 60, 70 milliliters, and your hosts and friends would keep pouring you more after you were done. After you, and as much as I pride my tolerance of alcohol, despite always keeping my drinking to social and celebratory occasions, the sheer volume of the alcohol likely gave me some bowel problems during the later half of the trip. Thankfully, this subsided when I returned to the U.S. My cousins, my cousins-in-law had to tell me that it was socially okay to dump the alcohol if I literally couldn't take anymore. And while my extended family don't seem to have suffered as much as the totalitarian descriptions in the American media would suggest, actually, they seem generally happier, if nothing else. The effects of China's policies have a clear effect on the family. Two of my cousins have second children who are 10 to 15 years younger than their older siblings, and the third cousin was having a second child himself after his 16-year-old son. My Chinese was sufficiently out of practice, and the speech I gave at the time in honor of my parents and grandmother had to be translated from English, that I have significant trouble keeping up with their activities on WeChat, which my parents use abundantly. Fortunately, in the present pandemic, they all seem to be doing okay. My parents and grandmother, who flew over from the US, were the happiest I've seen them in years, no doubt due to reuniting with family and friends across the Pacific Ocean. And I feel inspired, if not obliged, to describe their happiness in greater detail. It was a long trip, but no less a blessing to bear witness to their happiness. Thank you for hearing my recollection, fellow Toastmasters, and I hope you're all doing well. Thank you.
Okay, I'm here to evaluate Daniel's Icebreaker. I've been working with Daniel for a little bit, trying to get him, riled up and get him ready to do his Icebreaker. And I have to say, Daniel, 2 thumbs up.
Excellent.
I thought you did an excellent job for your Icebreaker. You spoke with a natural flow. You didn't let the medium, i.e. the virtual meeting, slow you down. I think you did a great job giving a virtual Icebreaker. So I want to commend you on how much information and detail you fit into 5 minutes. You touched on so many different topics. It was hard keeping up. Like I was furiously writing notes about what you were saying. So you fit a lot of information in the topic in the 5 minutes allotted, 4 to 6 minutes allotted for your speech, which I thought was really good. You also had hand gestures. You were using hand gestures to demonstrate the traditional ceremony dress and behaviors, and I thought that was a good addition to virtual speech. You were very generous with explaining the traditional ceremony for the uninitiated, the people who, like me, are not familiar with that kind of ceremony. So I thought the information you provided was very nice to introduce that type of cultural ceremony to the group at large. Appreciate you for that. And I like the shout out to Mong Yang about the tea. That shows you were paying attention to all of our Toastmaster speeches. So you knew Mong Yang is all about the tea, but you mentioned her with saying you drank a lot more alcohol than tea. So I thought that was a good shout out to her. And I like the fact that before you got into your speech about your trip to China, you gave us a little bit of intro into why you joined Toastmasters, which is good information for us, being your icebreaker. Maybe not many of us know you or your purpose for joining Toastmasters, so thank you for including that into your speech. So those are all great things that you did during your speech. Some things that I recommend for improvement is that you spoke very fast. Like I said, you had a lot of information and you spoke very fast, so it was kind of hard to keep up with everything you were saying. So maybe try slowing down your speech or varying your pace during your speech. And also work on some vocal variety, adding different textures to your voice when you're talking about different items, like you were burning the soup. So maybe you could, show some emotion like, oh, I burned the soup. Add some vocal variety like that. And also make sure you're looking at the camera, which I'm not doing right now. Looking at the camera during your speech to maintain that eye contact with your audience. And so for next time, I want to encourage you to don't let too much time go by before you schedule your next speech. Because it was great listening to you, and we're looking forward to your next speech. So great job.